If you have said to yourself, I should write that, or if someone has said to you, you should write that, then I'm talking to you because you need to write. And that's why you're tuned in to yWrite. Hi, welcome to yWrite. I'm your host, Angela Grout. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of yWrite, where we talk to writers and people in the writing industry about writing, not only to help you as a writer get your story told, but also to let audiences know how authors get their stories told. So today, we're doing a Zoom episode, and I have Lee Vincent here from West Virginia, which is why we're on Zoom. Hi, Gary. And
Hello,
I'm
Angela.
excited
Thank
to
you for
tell you
having
all that
me.
Gary is not only an author, he's an actor, he's been a director, and he's a book publisher. He is the owner of Burning Bulb Publishing. We're going to talk to him today, not only about publishing, we're going to talk to him about, what started his publishing company. He authored over 30 books. Some of them have even been made into series. They've been put into film. So the fact that he is so prolific with not only writing, but also, adjusting them and transcribing them for film is something, of course, I am always interested in because, as my audience knows, these are some of my own goals, which is why I invite guests on my show so that I can learn, which if I want to know these things, someone else must too. So again, I want to welcome Lee Vincent and thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show today.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. Very happy to be on.
Well, I'm excited. We met years back, and as my audience, if they've watched, I believe I should know the episode right now, but there's an episode with Michael Tourville, which I'll put in the comments. He wrote a book called A Promise to Astrid, and it became a movie, and you were the director.
Yes, I met Mike actually making the film A Promise to Astrid. It was shot in my local area in Bridgeport, West Virginia, even though it is set up there in Agawam and Chicopee and up in that area where you're at. And so we became really, really good friends. And eventually, my company became the book publisher of the book. So it was a book first, then it became a movie, and then it became a book that we published. And Mike and I have been great friends ever since. And it also, A Promise to Astrid, represented my directorial debut because it was the first movie I ever directed.
And you've done more since then, and you have
Right.
even directed your own films that you created from your own books, which, you've written over 30 books. So I definitely want to right now invite you on for another episode to talk about how you did that.
Would love that. Yes, Angela.
But today I really want to talk to you, about Burning Bulb Publishing and, what got you started in the publishing industry? Because I know that your one of your goals is to offer easier ways for writers to get their work published. And, as we all know, it's, struggling authors have a hard time getting published between trying to query the main houses or even self-publishing.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your story in Burning Bulb.
Sure. Burning Bulb, we founded that in 2008, 2009. I say we because there were several writers that I would hang out with that we were trying to find out how would you get published, and it was always the same kind of thing. We would be confronted with what we call vanity presses. These are just print shops that will charge authors a bunch of fees, and then they'll print their book. So it's like self-publishing, only has a little bit of quote vanity around it because they'll take anything and they'll print anything. And yes, there's enough of an infrastructure that will show up in stores like Amazon and stuff like that. But it always would be a fee. When they would range anywhere from several $100s to around $2,500. And it was just a way that people would get published. But we weren't really into that. But on the flip side, a lot of us just couldn't get our books published with major labels like, major imprints like Simon and Schuster or Penguin and it was just, we were baffled of what to do. So I launched Burning Bulb Publishing as a writers cooperative. There were many of us at the time. We just said, well, what if each of us did steps that major publishers would do, such as proofreading, editing, artwork, typesetting, and network market through each of our groups and our fans also attend each other's events, signings, do reviews, and actually help each other cooperatively, like a farmer's co-op. One brings the grain, one brings the animals.
Well, it's so true because as a self-published authors, if they're doing it themselves, whether they go through a vanity press or they're doing it through KDP Publishing or some Book
Yeah,
Baby online publishing or something, it's still, I want to say it's like guerrilla marketing.
right, absolutely. Well, here's the thing that the main where so we ended up being in this middle space. We weren't a major press, but we weren't a vanity publisher. And at the time that we started, that's when places like Create Space came on, which was Amazon bought, and that's what became KDP. And there were a lot of others, Lightning Source and other places that would allow print on demand. So the model in traditional publishing is mass market publishing or mass market paperbacks. These are the ones you go into Sam's Club or Walmart and you see these end caps full of these whatever the hot book of the day is. Those mass market paperbacks, these traditional publishers know that they'll sell so many of them, et cetera. But when you're independent or you're first starting off or you're not really well known, you don't have the sales ability to sell, say, 100,000 copies. So it's a very high risk to try to print that many and try to get them in those stores. It's possible, and there's a place that stocks them, but it's likely to be a big loss for you financially. So when print on demand came along, that offered a space for, of course, self-publishing. But if we were to jump in as Burning Bulb as a co-op with a group of people that would have oversight as to how the book looks and make sure that it's authored correctly. What I mean by that is an author often doesn't see certain mistakes they make, like if they
Yeah.
skip words or they might use apostrophes wrong or they put a single quote instead of a double quote or they don't
Yeah.
use
I
any.
always say I'm a better editor for other people than my own work.
Yes, and there is some, and I'm still using the word vanity, but there's also either through vanity or through frugalness. Oftentimes, an author is so happy with their work they refuse to let an editor see it or hear criticisms or something that will help the book. And so that's the idea. Was we just created this oversight basically to allow the book to go through a few more gates and to give it the best chance possible it does hit into the market, it will look and feel just like it's a major published book.
So how do people, I guess, I want to say, I want to know how people submit to Burning Bulb or how they can query Burning Bulb to say, hey, I've written a manuscript, I have the PDF file, how do I go forward with this?
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of questions, which is why you're on the show. So we'll just start with that.
No, that's a very common question. I usually tell folks we need at the very least three things, and one is a well-edited manuscript. Even though we do editing and copy editing and content editing, I do ask that the author at least have the thoroughness to at least quality
A
edit.
good final draft, a clean
Yeah,
final
good
draft.
draft to the best of their ability, a well-edited manuscript. We do prefer Word as a because it's editable. We can take PDFs, but that means we have to convert them, and oftentimes there's weird characters that come into it.
Yes.
So, and a Word document without a lot of crazy stuff. It doesn't, usually 12-point font Word document. We also ask that if they could send us in what we call the elevator pitch or the what you might see on the back cover of a book as the sales copy. In
Yeah.
other words, we just want to see is are we sold on the book? If we read this, does it seem interesting or not? And we change it if we might work with the author to rewrite it if it looks kind of lame. But we just want to see where the author's head is in the terms of what are they thinking about their book and what the book's about. So we usually ask for the elevator pitch or sales copy, and that's usually in the email when they send it to us.
Yeah.
And then finally,
well, it's good to almost describe it as like what's going to be on the back of the book because when you're in the store and someone's reading the back of the book,
bingo.
That's what's going to sell it or not.
Yes, yeah, and if it looks like, but this is a book I want to read, or people I share it with in our team, okay, that would be great. Oh yeah, this looks great. Or I don't know, it's like, well, it's one sentence. Okay, I don't know if that's going to sell it or not. And then we already know there might be a little bit of an issue if the author doesn't want to develop at least a sales copy. But we also do that to prepare the author to begin to think about not just the finished work of the book, but the marketing that comes afterward. And also, I also say if there's a tagline or a blurb, if they have a friend or a famous person or something, they want to offer a blurb on the book, that's great.
Yeah.
Or they can just write a great tagline, a thrilling horror set in, rural Maine or whatever, something that would just be the headline that would, or the thing you might see on the cover of the book next to the title. Okay, well,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like something cool. Let's flip it over and see what it's about.
Yeah, 100%, because it is so true. I did a children's book, and that's what I did is I went to, some teachers and, people who work with autistic children, and got quotes from them to make sure that it would be a book that
Yeah,
would be used in that
and
classroom
truthfully,
setting.
doesn't have to be a quote from like a president or Stephen King or somebody really major, which I think people get sidetracked on. It could, like you say, be a quote from a teacher.
Right.
People just want to see validation that someone
Yes.
else has read it and they think it's got merit.
Right. Yeah, 100%. So,
Mhm.
so people, they would approach you with a completed manuscript,
Yeah.
not like the idea. I have this
Yeah.
really great idea.
A lot of ideas, but it's hard for me to especially in the movie side. Oh, here I got this idea about for a movie. I'm like, well, hold on for a second. We're not really equipped because we get the ideas constantly.
Right, right.
And so usually there's a lot of steps involved from book to manuscript to book to screenplay to pre-production of a film. There's so many steps,
Yes.
and we're not really just because we have so many. I always tell people that just my one colleague, John Russo, I have a stack of over 40 screenplays from really great works that just he alone has done. And so any given day, we have years of work that we could get into if we had them all financed.
And John Jack Russo. I think I know
Yeah,
who you're talking about, right? Is this
yeah. Jack Russo, yes, the creator, co-author of Night of the Living Dead.
Night of the Living Dead? Okay.
Yeah, the famous zombie movie from 1968 that he and George Romero and his team from Pittsburgh put together, and really was an avant-garde bellwether moment because it created the flesh-eating ghoul, which all these zombies and horror things that we see today in pop culture are about. And just a little side note, John and I actually did a speech at West Virginia University a couple years ago because they have an actual studies course on zombieology. It's on the socioeconomic impact of zombies in modern culture. So we were on a board that was simulcast to all these campuses talking about the phenomenon of zombies.
That's amazing. Going to take the college class on zombies. And, I want to say, that you are, obviously a little bit of an expert on the zombie vampire world because that's some of the things that you have written about. And a lot of no, I mean, the majority of your books, I want to say, and especially your, the ones that have come into the series, you've talked about like that battle of good and evil, which is kind of what I think sometimes the zombie and vampire world does because you're like, looking to have longevity in life, but yet not sell your soul to the devil. And
Right.
as writers, I mean, whether an author wants to admit it or not, when you're writing a book that's tangible, that's going to be forever, you really are creating that longevity, that kind of vampire type life where your word lives on. And then of
Yeah.
course, you don't want to be selling your soul to the devil, and you want to make sure what you're writing is what's supposed to be put into the world. So you have that battle of, should I
Yeah.
be writing this? Is this, what are people going to think when I'm writing it? And then it's like, well, you're the only person who can write it. And, with your series, and I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now. I know it's prove your love
Yes.
films.com is your
Uh,
website, but that has your series of books in it.
Yes, Prove Your Love, and the is it's a really cool story, and hopefully I won't take up too much of your time telling you about it. But it it came about because my friend Jason Campbell and I, we were making faith-based films, and two of them landed on PureFlix. One of them called John Light, and the other one A Child of the King, which we filmed in Ecuador. And one of the vice presidents of content acquisition at PureFlix had asked us if we would consider making some more faith-based films for the network, and also if we would be interested in making mini series. So usually the way I write, before I actually go right into making a movie, usually I'll write at least a novella or what I call a treatment book
Yeah.
or up to a novel length story about what I think would be a good show or a good storyline. And at the time, we made Burning Ball. My company made a couple movies, and company, JC Films, was making movies, and Pureflix didn't take them. But we also knew that they were looking for miniseries, and Jason made a couple films related to the coronavirus, which I helped him with, and I started making this thing called the Black Circle Chronicles. It ended up being 5 little novellas. They were designed so that each novella could be quickly adapted to a movie, or in this case, a show, an episode. And so the first one was called Prove Your Love. And so we knew that if we not only had it, we had to at least make the pilot. So that was the idea. So me and a bunch of friends got together, and Jason had recommended Julie McCullough be one of the lead roles, and we reached out to Julie, and she was on Growing Pains, and she's been in The Blob, and
Oh yeah, Growing Pains. Yeah, I know who she
really a
is.
famous actress. And I wasn't even sure she'd be in it, but she said, "Yeah, she'd do it." So we all got together. We went out to Arizona. There's lots of a whole other story how it ended up in Arizona, but a group that believed in the film, they helped fundraise. A
And
lady,
you acted in it.
yes,
One of
yes.
your many acting credits.
So this is like one where I really feel that I did a lead role, main character, very conflicted individual who plays an atheist to begin with, and almost gets completely destroyed, but finally understands that there really is a spiritual battle going on. Again, keep in mind that we were originally writing this for Pureflix if they wanted a faith
Faith
based.
based.
So I'm a Christian myself, so I thought that having a person deal with spiritual battles would be a good subject matter.
Yeah.
And I told you before the show came on, and I'll tell the audience was, there's these memes out there which shows a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other talking to a person. I didn't want to do something making light of that, but I did take that idea a little further. But what if a person's thoughts came to them by way of individuals, the wrong company, that would basically feed them things that they shouldn't really be doing because they weren't of God. And
Well, and
so,
that happens though in reality too.
yeah,
I mean, it's
it's
not
a
just what
little thing
if.
and begins to spiral out of control. So, Prove Your Love and the Black Circle Chronicles really deals with a male-female demon that are people in the show that basically cause mischief in a very bad way. Their goal is to completely ruin ruin the lives of the people they encounter, as well as destroy churches and all vestiges of Christianity in the
Well,
world.
it's such a tearjerker because saw it like as an author, especially when you're first coming into the author world. There's so many insecurities and so many, like I said, like you're wondering like, should I be writing this? Should I put this into the world? What will people think? All of the kind of little mean girl inside me saying, don't do that, you can't do that, and then like prove you could do it, and then it's a matter of like knowing what you're putting into the world has a beautiful message, and
I have
I
my
always would say like if it's something that's going to harm you or someone, you can't do it. Is that the
Right,
film?
exactly. The thing about Prove Your Love was it the main character, which I play, his name's Josh, and he's basically an atheist at the beginning of the show, and his girlfriend Connie, which is played by Julie McCullough, she becomes a Christian and wants him to go to church and find the relationship with Jesus Christ that she had found. But what that does with Josh, he gets so mad about it that they break up.
Yeah.
And he's depressed. He goes through an alcoholic binge. And again, things that people will, by rejecting God, they begin to say, well, I can just, that's just stupid or whatever. And I'm going to live my life and make my own decisions. I don't need God. That's really the mindset of the Josh character. And then what happens is new friends come about, including a new girlfriend. And what he doesn't even realize is his own attempt to distance himself from God is actually pushing him into making some of the worst decisions of his life and begins to spiral his life out of control. So we find that these characters that he's involved with could they be vestiges of his mind, or are they real people, but what they really are demons. And you always hear the stuff battling your personal demons, but in the concept of the Black Circle Chronicles is these are immortal spiritual beings that are basically set against God and set to destroy humanity, destroy Christianity. And this, so each episode deals with a different kind of attack that they make. In Josh's case, they try to get him to shoot up a church and kill his girlfriend. In the next episode, which hopefully it gets made, but the book is out, we learn about how an infidelity begins to cause a person to get revenge, and these same characters are coaching that character into revenge to take it out on the husband and to really to mess up, and of course mess up churches because they seek people that are trying to have a relationship with God to especially destroy them. So it's
Yeah.
really spiritual warfare that's talked a lot about in Ephesians. So that was the premise of it. And so I did five books, and we were able to make the pilot. Pureflix changed ownership, or at least management, and they weren't into buying the miniseries by the time we got our pilot made. But we went ahead and released it ourselves, and we are working hopefully to get the funds available to make the next one.
Yeah, yeah, another reason to have an episode 3 with Gary Lee Vincent on how to fundraise and make films because
Yes, exactly.
that's all right. We may be this might be a trilogy,
Right.
but today let's go back to the burning bulb because as you know when you're talking about I'm Christian also, so and my viewers are aware of that. It's like when you have that spiritual kind of war going on with yourself as an author about publishing, reaching out to a publisher can be very daunting and pop a couple lorazepams or whatever it is, Ativans, saying, okay, you put on your big girl pants and do this. But it's like trying to get that book published into the world. I mean, my mission always with my book, Dear Baby Get Out, which of course is about pregnancy, is about being pregnant with that idea or that book that you have to give birth to. And finding someone like you and Burning Bulb to help their burning ideas that have been going
Yeah,
on in their head
right.
actually get published and
Mhm.
put on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all of those spaces. I mean, it's something that so many people are looking to do, whether they're trying to publish, their memoir for their families or they're trying to get it mainstream into the world. And that's something you do help them with.
Yes, absolutely. We know that we first touched on the book itself being published as a
Yeah.
physical book, but also that we've learned early on a few years ago that there's a whole other consumer group that consumes audiobooks because they're just too busy to read, or maybe they have visual problems, or they're busy commuting, driving really long distance for work or whatever. So they read by listening. And I
Yeah.
found out that sometimes going through scripts, I would get so many manuscripts, and sometimes I would be going from one book show to a convention or to a film set, and I would have these really long drives. So even before some of the better AI came out that would read things nicely, I would use like these handicap reader programs, like Voice Dream or whatever, to actually, a robotic voice was reading me the manuscript as
Yeah,
I'm
I do that.
8 hours to go to Atlanta or whatever to film something or whatever. And so I really, that's how I would be able to read the book and get back to the author because I was so busy traveling and all. And so then that really made me think that these books that we make should also be audiobooks.
Yeah.
And so initially audiobooks were hard because you had to go schedule studio time, including A Promise to Astrid. Michael Tourville is the narrator of his own audiobook along with a couple of his family. And so that we were incorporating the ideas of audiobooks. John Russo has a book called Dealey Plaza, and we hired that to be it was a 15-hour theatrical audio. So nowadays, with AI, there are readers that sound very natural, and they don't
Oh,
sound robotic. And
I didn't even think about AI. You're absolutely
yeah,
right. I
yeah.
mean,
On actually, we're part of Amazon's beta program for their AI robotic. This doesn't sound robotic, but the AI. There's 8 characters that Amazon has that they work with us with that we can produce audiobooks read by one of those characters. And even though they sound very much real, they are completely AI.
That's interesting. So when I recorded my Dear Baby Get Out book for audio, which is not available yet, but I did Zoom sessions like this and
Hmm.
recorded each chapter as a Zoom session, reading it so that therefore I could get the recording. So it did
Yeah.
make it easier than having to get a
Well,
studio. But using AI, like,
yeah,
mm,
here's the thing, as it goes from weeks of recording and making mistakes and deleting breaths and ums and different sounds,
yeah.
a
Or the
day or
dog barks in the background.
being done like 2 hours later, and now you're just listening to it because AI does sometimes make mistakes on certain words that have phonetically different meanings, like content and content, read and read.
Yeah.
So you have to catch it, but at least we have an editor. If you get to one of those odd words, you can phonetically alter it.
That's very cool. So what does it cost an author to come to you with their manuscript to
Well,
actually,
we're not a vanity press, so we don't charge our authors. We still select, so we don't take everything that we get. But if we do take it, we do not charge the authors any fees to publish their book or edit it or create the art or anything. What we do is, because we're a co-op, we do a 50-50 split. So if the book does well, we'll do well. If the book does bad, we won't get anything. But the idea is that our investment in the author, we put skin in the game.
yeah.
That's really what distinguishes us from a vanity press. Now, if a person says, "Hey, look, I don't want to share any of that. I want 100% of everything," we would recommend they go to a vanity press. There's
Mhm.
plenty of them out there. I think Lulu and different ones, Ex Libris and things like
And they
that.
can buy hard copies from you
Yeah,
of
they
their own
can buy.
books. So when
We
they're
can.
doing their own book
What we
signings,
do
they have that.
Yep, we typically mark. They're always going to be less than half the cost of the book, but we try to only mark it up about $1 on the author copies. So if the book costs $3 to print, we sell them for 4. And that's how we will make our money. And then when they go live, like on Amazon, we use usually a rule of 3. So if the book, let's say the book costs $3 to print, then we'll have a list price of like $9, for example. And so Amazon, we print it for 3, Amazon takes a cut, and then there's another $3 profit that we split with the author. So
That's,
that number is very variable
and who does
because,
the author get paid by? You? Direct, the Burning Bulb sends royalty checks?
yes, we do. We send royalty checks semi-annually. However, on our movies, we send them quarterly. So the books are semi-annually just because it's. I just being honest, it takes a lot of books to
Yeah.
make a decent check. So we just do them once in January for the previous 6 months, and then in July for those previous six
That's
months.
yeah, that's fair. I mean, because I know even with KDP, like they will wait. Well, they changed it now, but it used to be like until you got $200 in profits, you
Yeah,
didn't
well, we
get a
send
check.
whatever they get. Yeah, we just add up everything for the last run and just send you the whole thing at
Wow,
once.
you are so busy between, running a publishing company and writing books and making movies and acting and directing. And, you are a jack of all trades when it comes to this industry. So I'm so glad you took the time to talk to us. And I, really would love to share with the audience, like how they can get in touch with you, to find out about, your books and your movies, but most importantly, how they can, try to get into Burning Bulb Publishing and
Yeah,
get their books published.
we absolutely we really are author friendly. The doors open, and we were always created to create a safe space for writers, and we really don't want to take advantage of them. That's why we're not a vanity press. We know that we could take really bad stuff and just charge fees and all that. But if it is bad, we are too busy to take it on. We're honest about it up front.
How long does it
With
generally take from someone to send you the manuscript to get a printed copy?
Usually it depends on our workload, but usually 1 month up to 3 months. If it's really well polished, we can get it out the same month. If we're early in the month about it. But
Nice.
if we're in we're also very transparent in the sense that if I'm, got like right now we bought out all of Wolfpack's John Russo's books. John had about 16 books with Wolfpack, so we're about midway through republishing those. So I'll tell a person if they send me a book like today, I'll say, hey, look, we've got 8 other books ahead of you, so that might take 3 months before we can
Yeah.
get to you. So I'm very honest about that. Or if I'm working on a film or whatever, I'll say, hey, look, we can do it, but we're 6 months out or whatever, or hey, look, I got a book last week and it's a really good book. I knew the author. And even though I'm busy, I'm like, okay, I'm going to squeeze you in. I'll make you place 3 because I know it's a good one. He sent it to me a year ago in really rough form, and I
Yeah.
liked it. Finally finished it. So I knew that he was very serious and attended to it. He finished it, and so now, of course, we've been working with the author, so that makes a difference too.
So do people query Burning Bulb Publishing, or do they fill out like an online form?
No, we usually just they can go to our website. We have an email for this type of thing, and it's called admin, like administrator, but just the word
Yeah.
ADMIN at burning bulb bulb publishing.com. So that way, if they send me an email, then we can look at what they got. And then I usually ask them if they could just send me the sales pitch first, just to see if it's something I'd be interested in
Right.
or feel if there's a market. Another thing that we ask authors, and this is mainly if I don't know the author, is I usually ask them what are their strategies to market the book. And I do that just to see if they've thought of it, because there is a subgroup of people out there that feel that once the book is published, their work is done.
Yeah.
But I have to point out that there's over 10 million copies of books on different books on Amazon, and how will they know to find
Yeah.
their book in the 10 million others? Or the best example is just walk into a Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
Just walk,
100%.
just take a moment to look around. Just look around the store. There's over 100,000 titles
Yeah.
at any given Barnes and Noble.
See where
So
your book fits.
yes. So I want them to think about them as a person. How would they market their book, knowing that those astronomical odds are out there, that their book will be placed in this sea of other books? And sometimes people will say, hey, I don't care. I just want 50 copies for my family. And that just lets me know right there, it doesn't mean we'll deprioritize it, but we know that author doesn't really, they're mainly doing more of a vanity route. And of course,
Right.
I might, if it's badly poorly written, I might push them towards the vanity route because it's not so much a career writer. But if it's
Right.
something
So
that
you're
look,
looking for more career writers,
yeah, somebody
but you
might say
still will help out the personal writers.
yes, yes,
All
yes.
right. So they
They
can reach you
must
at
be a little, yeah,
admin@burningballpublishing.com.
yeah. Admin at burningballpublishing.com. And of course, that back part, burningballpublishing.com, is our website. It definitely needs an update because we get so much content that I can't keep the webpage
Me
updated.
too. Me too.
So
I think we
I
all
need
need
a
that
webmaster.
person to manage our websites.
Yes, I need a webmaster because we're also doing films as well. So we're getting close to 300 different titles in books and about 120 different films and distribution. So that we really need a full-time web admin to just get there and work on that. But going back to the book really fast, and if a person says, "Hey, look, I'm going to go to every library in the region and I'm going to be touring it," then we know that that person has more serious aspirations. They're going to treat it like a career. If they say they want to go on a podcast tour, that's great. And that will also move their book up the priority list. You know,
Nice.
because we know that they're not just writing it for their vanity, but they're writing it because they're wanting to earn a living with it, and
Yeah.
that's more interested because we know we're here to help all authors,
Yeah.
but also we want to help those that are trying to earn a living on it. Then we want to be a focus that we get them, advise them right and all, and it's not
Yeah.
just
And that's a big lesson that authors learn is that, we have our author hat on, but when the book's published, the
yes,
marketing hat comes
absolutely
on, and now you become, the sales agent for the book, the sales agent for the message that you've
right.
already created. So, there's a whole nother, podcast in there. And I have been talking to some people about how they can market their books. So this has
Yeah,
been very, very, very informative. Thank you again so much for coming on this show. I really appreciate it. And, one of the things that I do on my show is I always give my writers a writing prompt towards the end of the show. And I think today, I'm going to give them the writing prompt based on how to, how to query, write an email to you about like why they want you to, be interested in publishing their book. So I'm going to turn to my audience now and say, when the show is over, turn your, microwave timer, your cell phone timer on for 10 or 15 minutes and just start writing. And like Gary has been telling us, write about like, who is your audience? Think about where your book's going to be placed in the bookstore. Not just the genre, but who is going to be looking to buy this book and why. And then write up that summary, write up what the back of your book is going to say, because if they're in the bookstore and they're going to pick that book up, we're in the maternity section here, we're finding this book. Why am I going to read this book? What's different about this book than any other maternity book on the shelf? So that's your writing assignment today is, write that summary, that, selling line that, you could send over to Burning Bulb Publishing to say, hey, I wrote a book. This is what it's about. Da, 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 da. And, I really think that it would be great, in this genre. And this is what I'm willing to do to help market my book. Because those are the things that as an author, you have to really think about. So there's your
Absolutely.
writing prompt for today. Thank you, Gary, for giving me that. And again, I'm going to put all the links on the channel here so that you can, get his email. You can check out burningballpublishing.com. You can talk about, look up proveyourlovefilms.com. Find out about, everything that Gary's doing. Check out some of his 30 books. He's got the how-to books. He's got